Someone who loves you tender like I do. And there's no one else. No. Whew. A lot of games to get through. Here we go. Welcome back to Get This Game. I'm Jake, and if you're here, you're probably here for some board gaming goodness. And speaking of that, June was probably one of the best months I've ever had on record in terms of getting board games to the table. I played almost 20 different titles, easily over 30 plays throughout the entire month. So what we're going to do today is just kind of go rapid fire through them. If you've come to me through TikTok or Instagram, you kind of know my style and what I typically tend to like and gravitate towards. We're going to talk about each of the games that I played, a little bit of background on them, and just my kind of top level thoughts to see what I think. If you want to look more into them or you want to find out more about them, many of them are already up on my TikTok or Instagram channel. They might even be here on my YouTube channel. As always, I hope you can maybe subscribe if you like my vibe, my general feeling. Again, if you like my take on board games, please continue to follow along, hit the bell, and give me a thumbs up and comment what you played in the month of June. My first few games I was able to play at home. Starting off with Star Tycoon. This was a game sent to me by Good Games Publishing, so thank you very much. And it was made and designed by Warp Core Games. Now, this one basically sees you as your own galactic empire, where you will be going out exploring planets and then using them to basically harness their resources by building developments on them. That comes in the form of a card market where there are different levels of upgrades and developments that you can build that get better as you go along, but they also cost more resources. Now, the other aspect of this game, in addition to a little bit of engine building, a little bit of resource management, is the market manipulation, because you're always dealing with this market board in the center of the table, where basically the laws of supply and demand come into play. You want to be selling your resources when their value is really high, and every time they do, the value gets kind of lower and lower. You also want to be buying resources that you need to complete those developments when they are at a really low price. And as it goes around the table, those numbers and the value of the different resources are going to kind of shift around. So this one was good for me. I did mostly play it solo when I was testing it out. I did like the little puzzle, and the solo rules are actually very streamlined and very similar to the main kind of point of the game. Here I did like the different asymmetric factions. There's some cool like tongue-in-cheek sort of different races and almost companies that you get to start out with that are fun and actually are pretty different from one another in terms of leading you down a certain style of play that have different powers. I think the market manipulation here is limited. This is kind of what sold me on the game at first when I first agreed to test it out. But because you can only, I guess, kind of try out and move, buy or sell a very finite number of resources every given turn, those swings on the market don't necessarily happen as often as I would have hoped. As a result, you kind of, by the time it gets back around to you on your turn, you haven't seen necessarily a huge amount of movement, unless of course you're probably playing at the highest player count possible. I would probably go with this at either, again, the solo experience being pretty good, maybe 3 max. I don't know that I'd necessarily go to 4. In the end, liked some of the individual pieces here, but none of them are necessarily net new or doing anything revolutionary or different. So that's Star Tycoon. Next, my fiance and I got in a game of Lost Ruins of Arnak. Specifically, we replayed one of the cooperative scenarios in the Missing Expedition. I'm cheating. I don't have to bring out the big giant box. We played the main game, but with the Missing Expedition expansion. If you don't know, Lost Ruins of Arnak, you're exploring a kind of fantastical island as like an Indiana Jones type character. And in the normal game, you are basically visiting different locations of the island to collect resources, using workers as a sort of worker placement mechanic. And then you are researching it by advancing up a track, trading in certain resources for others. Ultimately, it's a big point salad at the end of the game. The Missing Expeditions expansion basically adds a cooperative component. So we have already played through the entirety of the, I think, 7-chapter campaign, and we really, really liked it. And we hadn't played it or brought it out in a while, so we decided, hey, let's pick one of the more challenging scenarios. We haven't broken this out a bit. Let's see if we can ultimately beat it. In the end, we did not. It was one of the harder scenarios that I remember us struggling with before. I don't necessarily know that I would recommend kind of bringing this out as a one-off scenario after you have beaten the entire campaign. I would say the campaign itself is really rewarding in terms of the different surprises and challenges that the different scenarios throw. But when you go back to it as a one-off, it was maybe just lacking a little bit in terms of that fulfillment level that I experienced when playing through the full campaign. I would probably stick to playing Lost Ruins of Arnak competitively. It is really good. I have some non-gamer friends as well who enjoy this game a lot, and I have a lot of fond memories playing with them. So I would say Lost Ruins of Arnak, great game, definitely high on my list. And the expansion that gives it the cooperative feel is also really good. Just don't play it as a one-off. Enjoy the experience through the kind of campaign mode, and then be ready to be done with it. I was able to successfully get this off the shelf. We also played Ark Nova this month. This is probably my fiance's favorite game of all time. She's also very good at it, and I never beat her. Here you are, frankly, building your own zoo from top to bottom with a whole bunch of mechanics kind of smushed in and combined together. Sometimes you will be using action selection to maybe gain some sponsorships. You might be using them to add animals to your park. You might be building new enclosures to fill up your little map, which is its own little polyomino puzzle where you're trying to see how everything connects together. This game, just from top to bottom, is excess in terms of how many things are going on with it, and honestly that is kind of why we love it. All the different pieces just work really cohesively together. I don't put a lot of stock in any of the kind of things that people shoot down this game for, like the big giant deck of cards that you're never, absolutely ever going to get through. All of the pieces here just kind of come together for me to be really satisfying. I feel like I never tire of this game, and it's the reason that it's, you know, my #2 game of all time. So Ark Nova, played it after a while, still really good. All right, another new to us game that we got, and actually a pretty relatively new game in general, was Coffee Rush. Now, you can check out my channel right here on YouTube for my full kind of breakdown, the different range of emotions that I feel when playing this game, because this game is essentially stress in a box. It is a situation where you're going to be playing as your own barista, running a coffee shop, taking orders, and fulfilling recipes of orders by moving a pawn around a little grid to collect different ingredients. You then take those ingredients, fill up your little cups, and you send them off and fulfill those orders. Now, what makes this game so stressful is the fact that after every round, whatever recipes and orders you don't fulfill get shifted down on your timeline. And the closer they get to the bottom, the more at risk you are at not completing them and then losing points at the end of the game. Especially, too, when your other opponents start completing orders themselves. When they do that, that is when you're going to be adding those new orders to the top of your line. So as good as your opponents are doing, it's making it even worse for you to try and complete and beat the kind of scenario and the puzzle in front of you. So this one, for me, really good. The component quality is top-notch, 10 out of 10. Cannot say enough good things about it. I think the challenge for me here is, especially at a lower player count, for me, it was just a reality where the scoring in the end game score was very deterministic. Like, because in a smaller player count, because your moves are directly impacting your opponents, which are directly impacting you back, you end up kind of with a very similar score. And we had a lot of similar scores kind of all jumbled together. But again, if you want to hear more about the game and get more into the depth and the detail of it, check out my YouTube video on it. But Coffee Rush, definitely one I'm going to bring out for kind of new gaming groups. It's very simple, it's very quick to learn, but just keep in mind that you probably want to play this at a higher player count than a lower one. I've also started going regularly to my town's local board game club, where we meet up at a local game store and we just play a bunch of games that people feel like going for at any given night. Now, this is not something that I am used to doing, and I think a lot of people actually who follow me were surprised that I wasn't kind of doing this already, but I have issues with meeting new people and being around new people. It's why I talk in front of a camera with no one else around a lot of the time. When I was a kid, my mom had to take me to birthday parties really early and have me be one of the first people there, because walking into a room with a lot of people who were already talking to each other was indeed kind of terrifying to me. Too much information. I'm going to therapy. I'm working on it. It'll be fine. But of course, as a result of me kind of putting myself out there and going, I've been able to play a lot more games than I normally would have, and I've also been having an extremely fun time doing so. The first time I went, we started out with like a huge big kahuna. We played Brass Birmingham, the #1 game on Board Game Geek, and it was awesome. I want to shout out the guys that I played with for being really patient with me. I only hope that like the moves that I was making and my kind of decisions didn't impede other people's strategy and kind of like like break the game. I don't think it did. One person did kind of go off on their own and get a pretty higher score than the rest of us, but I tied for last, so that's something. Very quickly, Brass Birmingham, you are essentially oil and coal barons in Birmingham, where you are going to be building out a network of industry. You are going to be creating coal mines, iron forgeries, and then a bunch of other resources that you can go out and sell and add to the map. And the kind of puzzle and the goal here is to really build out that network so that you're connecting your network of resources with others and being able to kind of follow along the chain and get points by having other people use up the coal and the iron and other resources that you produce. So overall, really liked it. A really first good experience with the game. I don't think I would be ready to give it an overall rating at this point, being my first play, but it's definitely one I want to revisit, hopefully with some more board gamers so I can kind of get their take and also kind of build out just how much there can be to this game, Brass Birmingham. Because Brass Birmingham is a bear, we didn't get to play another full game, but we played one of the most talked about kind of filler games that has come out, I think, so far in 2024, and that's Harmonies. Harmonies sees you building an abstract puzzle. The theme here is animals and habitats, yes, but you know, it's pretty vague here. You are kind of putting out tokens onto a board, but here you are going to be not only building out a puzzle and orienting different kind of habitats out on the board in a certain configuration, but there's a 3D level to this game where you are actually able to build on top of existing kind of habitats. So you want your mountains to be really high. If they're a certain height, then you get even more points. You can start with a stump of a tree and then build that up to be a full-fledged tree with a top on it. And while you're doing that, you're also trying to fulfill different combinations and patterns to be able to kind of cash in on some animal cards, kind of fulfill those goals that you're looking to complete on your board, and then ultimately those will be even more points for you at the end of the game. Really liked this one. The challenge for me in terms of adding it to my collection is I have so many other kind of like abstracty, puzzly things. Like, it's hard to beat Cascadia for me in terms of just like one that I'll keep going back to. Habitats has enough going on here that it is different and varied. I just don't know if it's something I need to necessarily own. I think it's one that I would happily say yes to playing any time of day, but I just have a lot of kind of like tile laying or abstract puzzly games that kind of scratch that itch. So great game. Check it out if that is a void in your collection. At least play it and see if it's going to be for you. But maybe for me, probably something I will break out anytime somebody throws it at me, but might not make my collection, at least for right now. Somebody can convince me differently though. Back at home, we were able to get some other games crossed off that were on our shelves collecting dust. Pan Am was probably sitting there for almost a full year. We got it at a game store kind of on a whim. We were like, oh, that's a cool cover, cool concept in terms of building out plane routes. Let's try it out. And then it sat and sat, it sat because we were just waiting and begging for kind of this to be a game to play with more people. It is good at 2, don't get me wrong. You really hear this game sing when you're playing it with more. Here, basically, you are a fledgling airline trying to build out your empire by expanding and building routes to connect between cities. And ultimately, what you're trying to do is have those routes basically bought out by Pan Am itself, one of the biggest airlines of the time in the 1950s. You want to do that because basically you are going to be buying stocks in Pan Am over the course of the game. The stocks are basically the victory points. So the more you are able to kind of sell back to Pan Am, the idea here kind of being the more Pan Am is going to be worth and you get to buy more points. It's a little bit confusing in terms of that stock system. That's probably one of the hardest points to kind of convey and get across. It's like, no, you want Pan Am to take your routes. You want them to kind of build out. But what I really like about this game ultimately is the fact that there is this really cool kind of silent auction system where there are a number of different places that you're going to be putting your little workers out there, your engineers. You can be using them to buy new planes. You can be using them to build airports, which are kind of permanent spots across the world map that you get to kind of build out routes from. But some of the spaces are actually going to have numbers in them, and that is going to represent the amount of money you have to pay if you win that cart or that airplane, etc. So what you end up happening is if somebody really wants a certain destination card to be able to build around that city, you might be wanting to go for it too, and then it turns into this cool like kind of one-upmanship. And if you're playing with more players, there's even more kind of competition and working towards the certain cards because you only have so many workers to go around. So that aspect of the game is really tight and kind of interesting and kind of makes you pull your hair out a little bit when somebody is trying to go for the same thing that you are, and you need to make that tough choice. Do I let it go, or do I go all in, paying even more money, which I desperately need to get that spot, but it could set me up in the long run. So that's enough about Pan Am. Really enjoyed this one. Again, more content across all my channels about it if you want to learn more. Next up, if you've watched me for a bit, you'll know that Viticulture is in my top 5 games of all time, at least as of 2023. We got the chance to play Viticulture World, which was generously provided by Stonemaier Games. This was a review copy for us to try out. Viticulture World, similar to the Lost Ruins of Arnak expansion, takes a competitive game and gives it a kind of cooperative option and feel to it. Instead of having competing wineries kind of working it out to place their workers onto different spots in the summer and winter to kind of plant grapes, harvest them, and then make wine, you are now working together to kind of beat and push out through different scenarios that have variable kind of challenges and aspects to them. So very similar to a lot of other expansions that make things cooperative. It is kind of can be played both as a one-off or kind of sequentially throughout an entire campaign, and adds a bunch of little odds and ends throughout that I'll let you decide. Ultimately for me, I really liked kind of the adjustment that this made to make it work as a cooperative game. I think I still prefer the original, the competitive mode. It is just so clean and streamlined. When you have the Essentials Edition with all the best parts of Viticulture Tuscany in it, it just is like such a good gaming experience, which feels like everything needs to be in the box, but you're still not feeling like it's too thin and not much going on. Viticulture World is definitely something to kind of wrap your head around. You can't play the same way you play regular Viticulture than you do when you play Viticulture World, so you have to kind of keep that in mind. Personally, I ultimately just kind of like Viticulture as it is, so definitely a cool experience to try this out. Definitely worth it if you enjoy cooperative games. If you do like Viticulture, like this is something I could see us continuing to kind of pick away at every now and then, but we'll kind of streamline it and kind of flip-flop back and forth between this and kind of base Viticulture. Next, I had the pleasure of going over to my buddy's place and we played his copy of Deep Rock Galactic, which is actually based off a video game. In the video game, you play as space dwarves, so like intergalactic miners who go to distant planets to mine for resources, and along the way you come across giant bugs that you have to squash. So spoiler alert, if you have seen already on TikTok and Instagram my top games of the month for June, you'll know that this was my #1 pick from the month. It was absolutely fantastic. I don't get the chance to play a lot of dungeon crawlers just based on the game groups that I play with. We don't get to break those out as much. It's just not everyone's cup of tea. So I always have it in my mind that these dungeon crawlers are just like big epic things where you're chucking a lot of dice, there's a lot of rules overhead. They're bears if you're going to break these guys out. I'm happy to report that Deep Rock Galactic does such a good job of streamlining the kind of dungeon crawl experience. The weapon system is super simple. You have a main weapon and a side weapon. You can do some minor upgrades and give them a little bit of a boost, but beyond that, you are really focused on maneuvering around the board, choosing between a very manageable set of actions to pick from, and you just play the game. The game just gets out of your own way and you just get to enjoy the experience. I love the world in this one. I love the different customizations and the different special dwarves and what their unique abilities are. I felt like they were all really different and you really had to use teamwork together to kind of figure out the puzzle of each scenario. Definitely one I'm hoping to return to. We were able to go through a ton of scenarios because the game is kind of so easy and easy to get going. So hoping to do more of Deep Rock Galactic in the future. Then just like that, I was back at my local game store for another night of games. When I arrived, one of the guys had just gotten back from Origins and he had brought brought along a copy of Footprints, which is a kind of caveman racing game. So we ended up playing that almost at the full player count. I believe it was 5. Here you are basically using one card per turn to traverse over different types of terrain. It's kind of like, I want to say the game is a Quest for El Dorado, where you're doing a similar sort of racing mechanic, going across different terrain by playing cards that specialize in that type. And then from there, you're going to be along the way kind of building out cave paintings. You're advancing along different tracks that make you even more kind of adept at moving over certain types of terrain, as well as each kind of caveman faction having their own set of special abilities and cards that can really swing the momentum here. This was good. This was a game that I thought I was doing way better at than maybe some other people around the table, but I still came second to last, which is okay. Really, you know, this was pretty good. I definitely want to play it more before I give it kind of a final rating, but I did like, you know, the important decision of kind of choosing, okay, am I going to really go all in on movement this turn to try and race other people up and maybe steal some resources before they get to them? But then also maybe choosing to hang back and instead really focus on making some of my tracks and terrain more effective, so that when I do decide to move on a future turn, I'm going to be that much more effective at it. This game throws a little bit of that into it. There is some opportunity for a bit of point-sality-ness going on here. In the end, only one of us ended up making it to the far end of the map, and he was obviously the eventual winner. So definitely something I want to try again and get another crack at, knowing now kind of how the system works and what's going to be a good move versus not. And then our second game of the night was an older option. This was The Captain is Dead, which is a game by AEG. Now in this one, it is cooperative. It really did remind me very much of like the Horrified series, maybe even Pandemic, but I think Horrified's a more direct comparison. Basically, you are members of a crew on a spaceship and aliens are invading. The captain is dead and you have to work together to basically build up the warp drive of your ship to be able to blast off and evade the enemy attack. For me, this one was okay. The first play wasn't absolutely my favorite. There's a bunch of stuff going on in terms of how each of the different rooms of the ship work. It's kind of like the video game Among Us, where you have different parts of the ship and there are different actions you can take within each room. And sometimes those different parts of the ship are going to break down and you have to repair them. There's that kind of cascading flow of event cards, like in most cooperative games, where there always going to be bad stuff that happens to your ship. Overall, I think I felt maybe the effects of a little bit of quarterbacking going on, although I think it was just in everyone's interest, being that late into the night, to just kind of work together towards the end. I think that was more on me for maybe not internalizing the rules as well as I should. So I was very much kind of in the passenger seat, kind of looking for some help to see what I could do on my turn and how best to achieve the goal. We didn't win. Again, a bit of a spoiler alert. We played it again in a game night in July and I had a much better experience about it. So I'll probably share more when the time comes for my July video. But yes, Captain is Dead. Not a great first experience, but one that grew on me a little bit later on. Circling back to games I was able to play at home, the next one we were able to get to the table is Potion Explosion, which is a game that was provided by Horrible Guild and Flat River Group to me for review. This is a kind of a bit more of a classic kind of welcoming game. Basically, you are all wizarding students who are going to be building potions by using little marbles that come in the form of this kind of cascading dispenser. So you'll see on the board and in the B-roll that I'm going to show is that there's this big dispenser with a bunch of marbles flowing down from them. On your turn, you are going to choose a marble to take, and what you're trying to do is once you take that marble, the two marbles on the either side of it are going to kind of come together and merge and hit each other. If they are the same color, you have created an explosion, and guess what? You get to take those marbles as well to ultimately take in front of you and then start to fill out the recipes of different potions that you have selected. They are going to be different breakouts of different colors, and you're trying to use those marbles to fill in the different spaces on them to complete that potion. Each potion is going to be worth a certain number of points, and each potion also has its own kind of special ability that once you complete it, you'll have access to throughout the course of the game. I realized in playing this game why it is kind of a game that's stuck around for a while as a very, kind of loved, welcoming game option. Maybe not one that all of the kind of core gamers are going to be excited for when it hits the table, but I mean, like for me, I really saw the value in this type of game. It has the kind of table presence that you want in a game that makes somebody like look at it and be like, what the heck is this? I didn't even know board games could do this. And I also just kind of loved that there was that little extra aspect where you're not just fulfilling recipes, you're also trying to actually complete the potions themselves. You're trying to use those powers to your advantage because those are a big part with the way you're able to kind of maximize how all of the different potions. There's something in my eye. Oh my goodness. Okay, we're good. There, yeah, just, it was really nice to see that the actual potion effects are really, really important and that you have to kind of think about which ones you're taking on to be able to win out and do as best as you can. So Potion Explosion, a great welcoming option. I have a ton of welcoming options on my shelf. So in terms of this one kind of having that table presence, I really, really like that. And it's my birthday at the end of June. I'll give you a moment to wish me a happy birthday in the comments. But my fiance asked, what did I want to do on my actual birthday? All I wanted to do was go to another kind of board game cafe that's in our town and just sit down, have some drinks, and play some board games with her. So that's exactly what we did. I'll cross off a couple quick games right out of the gate. I tried to make sure that, you know, I was playing some of the classics with her along with some other kind of more intricate games that we also still enjoy and like trying out. So we did play Sequence and we did play Triominos. These are kind of ones that we grew up with and before kind of hobby board gaming was a thing. Sequence, basically you are playing with a standard deck of cards. You play out a card and there is a map or kind of like a grid of all the different cards in a 52 card deck out on the board. When you play a card, you will take one of the little chips and put it on the corresponding space based on what card you played. And you're trying to basically suss out and try to put together groups of 5. Once you have a line of 5, you are one step closer to finishing the game. A good one that we both actually have fond memories of. It's kind of cool that we both played this in our childhoods, and as adults we can kind of now come together, live together, and be able to still enjoy that experience. And then Triominos, basically it's dominoes with the extra layer of having 3 different sides of it instead of 2, which is in a standard domino game. I'm just going to be straight up with you. I suck at this game. I cannot just basically like put my brain in the right headspace to see all of the different combinations of moves, and even less brain space to figure out which of those moves is optimal. I totally would appreciate anyone who's really good. My fiance's mom's really good at this one, so shout out Lori. But in the end, you know, just one that I probably can't wrap my head around. I need a little bit more of a theme to really appreciate games like that. But we did play those 2 at the Board Game Cafe. We also got in a game of Splendor. This is one I usually play on BGA a lot. We don't own a physical copy, but it's that kind of welcoming level weight and complexity that it just kind of is the perfect option when you're at a board game cafe. So whenever we're there, we usually like to break that one out at least once. Here, it's a kind of core engine building system. You are collecting gems, and by trading in different combinations of gems, you're going to be able to buy cards that go out in front of you. Not only are some of them going to be worth points, but they also are going to count as one of those gems for a future purchase for you. So what you're really doing is buying up different cards and using those gem tokens and trading them in to the point where you don't even really need to take that many gems because you've developed this kind of complex engine that lets you often enough take cards for free. So this is like, again, another great welcoming option. It is a gold standard in terms of a game that you can play at a restaurant or a board game cafe as long as you have the space for it. It's really good. Whether I'm playing this on BGA or in person with those really nice chips, I have a good time with it. Another new to us game that we were able to get to the table and play was my Shelfie. This is a kind of tile laying fair where you are basically going to have a different number of things that normally go on your shelf, books or games or even cats. And what you have in front of you is almost like a Connect 4 style grid that is standing up. And on your turn, you're going to take a few tiles and you're going to choose one of the columns in your little grid there or your shelf and drop them in, and you are trying to reach different scoring conditions. You'll have your own personal one in front of you, as well as some shared scoring conditions that you are doing a bit of a race at to try and get to first. Nothing wrong with this game at all. Again, speaking of welcoming options, I think this definitely fits that mold with the gimmick of that kind of Connect 4 shelf grid that a lot of people will kind of be familiar with in terms of the process of, yeah, it's fun to drop down the different tiles and the different pieces into that grid. Probably not one that we need to necessarily buy. It is one I am happy to play anytime, and we had a good experience taking it off. It was really quick to learn and play. Just again, probably one I'm good with just playing as a core gamer and not necessarily putting in the expense to add to my shelf, but still good. And the final game that we played in June, I mean, did I save the best for last? You tell me. This is already on a bunch of award lists for 2024, including this year's Spiel des Jahres nominee. And it is a little game for just 2 players called Sky Team. I had to run up and grab it to bring it downstairs because we've had this upstairs for a while now. Now, we first played this at the Board Game Cafe. We kind of had it in our minds, like, if that one's there, we've heard a ton about it and we want to get it to the table. We did. And not to spoil things once again for a third time, but it was so good that we immediately went out and bought a copy ourselves. So I'm not going to say too much more about it beyond the fact that it is, again, a 2-player cooperative game where you are working together as pilot and co-pilot, using dice to place them out onto spaces on a board, trying to land your plane successfully. I want to save all of my thoughts because I have way more than just kind of saying we played it and then immediately bought it, but I'm going to save that for another video. With that being said though, Sky Team really did a great job of kind of closing out our month of gaming just by the first impression alone. So like I said, quite a few games played in the month of June. Maybe on the smaller side based on many other gamer standards, but honestly, this was a revelation for me in terms of how much I was able to get to this month and how many games I actually enjoyed from this month. I think I'd maybe think about getting flack for rating games so high or even just rating games like okay or pretty good, but we really truly are in a time where the standard is just so high for tabletop board gaming that every game, it just kind of sets its own standard, and like it goes through many checks and balances that they're probably already going to be pretty good. And just from this small sample size from 1 month alone, we're definitely staying on the same right trajectory. Maybe not a golden age necessarily, like some people say we're now out of, but certainly one where gaming isn't slowing down, and there's just so many options out there that there's going to be no kind of shortage of what's going to be able to be getting to the table. So that was it for this video. Again, I'm Jake and this was Get This Game. If you like this format in terms of just kind of running through and giving some quick thoughts on all the games I played each month, let me know. Once again, please do subscribe and consider leaving a comment, ringing the bell so that you know when future videos are going to come up, and just liking the video. It just kind of helps us out a lot. Want to continue the momentum from our TikTok and our Instagram. We're having a lot of fun over there, and if you do like more short form content, I encourage you to follow me there. And as always, we'll see you next time for what looks like will be plenty more board gaming goodness.